Bellingham, Washington is about 20 miles from the Canadian border in the northern part of Washington state. During the Vietnam War, a lot of people flooded into Bellingham in case they got that dreadful draft notice so they could dodge the draft and hop the border. So that meant that a lot of so-called hippies and beatniks fled there, started communal farms, intentional communities, and a really deep love for the green plant marijuana. I went to Western Washington University, which is one time listed in High Times magazine as the most stoned university in the country. It was up on a hill, surrounded by trees and forest, with a view of the bay, really beautiful. I worked at a burrito shop called Casa Que Pasa, which was owned by a 19-year-old, and it was an actual edict that you had to hit the company bong both before and after your shift. Just setting up the vibe in Bellingham, okay. So while I was going to university, I developed gallstones. If you've never had them, it is the most pain you can experience besides having a baby, which I've never had, but I've had gallstones, which is probably close in my estimation. And I had to have an operation, so I left school for about 4 days and recuperated at my folks' house up in Canada. When I came back to campus, chaos had descended upon my university. The measles, there was a measles epidemic sweeping the campus. Students were running as if they could outrun measles. There were nurses everywhere. And it was so bad that the university administration was worried the measles would make their way down the hill into the town. So they demanded that everybody get vaccinated. But it's Bellingham, and it's Western Washington University, and people are like, no, man, you can't make me get vaccinated. So they said, okay, fine, we're going to bring in the National Guard and quarantine your campus. Now, there were a few of us that felt if we had enough provisions, if you get my meaning, we would like to be quarantined. There's a forest, there's a great view, I won't have to go to work or do my laundry, we just hang out on campus, eat at the cafeteria. I mean, that sounds like a good time to me. But they started to get really serious about getting vaccinated. So I come back to campus and I have 3 incisions on my stomach with stitches. Not to get graphic, but you need to understand my physicality at the time. So I'm like, I could barely walk. I'm taking an advanced literature class. We're studying The Fairy Queen by Edmund Spenser. If you've ever read The Fairy Queen, it's this giant book of verse. It's really intense. So I go to my class, and the door's locked, and I press my face up against the glass, like, hey, let me in. I'm finally back from my surgery. And everybody's horrified, looking at me, and I think, wow, I must look really bad. And the teacher's backing away from the door going, you can't come in, you're blacklisted. And I'm like, what? It's just a fairy queen, let me in. And he says, you're on a list. I'm like, wait, this is McCarthyism. You've got to let me into my class. And he said, you haven't been vaccinated. You're not allowed to attend any classes. I'm like, whoa, man, this is really intense. And so I did what any university student would do, is I threatened him. I said, if you don't let me in, I'm going to get down and breathe under the door. And the students are holding up their giant book of verse, shielding their faces like I have the plague. So I mean, and I'm a drama kid, so I'm an actress. I get down on the floor carefully because I have stitches, and I start breathing under the door. Panic in the classroom. The students are running to the far side of the room. Well, I get in big trouble for breathing under the door of my class, right? They send me to the nurse's annex, and the nurse says, okay, you are not allowed to have the regular vaccine due to other circumstances, so you're going to have the alternative. Okay, the good news is, yay, you won't get the measles. The bad news is, it's 6 injections in your ass. So get up and lie on the table on your stomach. I'm like, I can't. I have stitches. And she's like, get on the table. So I'm sort of trying to lay, but with my ass in the air. And she says, okay, I'm sorry, but the vaccine is really thick, so it doesn't go in very easily, and it hurts a lot. I'm like, oh, my God. She gives me the first shot, and I think it was worse than the gallstones that I had. It was so painful. So when you get a shot and it hurts, you're like, okay, it's a shot. I can muscle through it, right? And then I'll go, like, have a drink or smoke a bowl. But I had 5 more to go, and 2 more in the same ass cheek that the first one had gone in. By the 4th shot, I was screaming for my mother, crying. It hurt so bad. A nurse comes in and she says, Jane, you really need to stop screaming. You're making the other students in the waiting room cry. So after an eternity, I finally hobble out. So I've got this going on. Now I have that pain. So I'm walking through the waiting room and I'm sobbing and I have to sort of like hobble like this. Well, the other students don't know that I've had surgery. They think this is their fate. So they burst into tears. One guy gets up and runs out. So I'm outside, and I think, well, I can't walk home. I can't go to, I could go to classes, but I can't walk to classes. So I went to a phone booth, you guys. And I dialed a number in a phone booth. I don't know if anybody remembers that. We had people's phone numbers memorized. I think our brains were bigger then. And I called my friend Vegas. I don't know, his name was Vegas, my name was Vegas, and our other friend was Reno. I don't know why. So I call Vegas, and I'm like, you've got to help me. I'm in so much pain, the ass, the stomach. And so he comes and picks me up, and he says, we're going to go to the Keg, which was our jam, the Keg restaurant, to get stuffed mushroom caps. But in his car, I couldn't sit down. Luckily, I'm short, so I could kind of stand up in the front seat, because I couldn't sit on my butt. And then we get to the Keg. They take us to our table. It's a wooden bench. I'm like, I'm going to have to lie on the bench. I can't sit down. And Vegas says, when you had your operation, didn't they give you something for that? And I was like, yeah, they gave me Vicodin. And he said, well, take the Vicodin for your ass pain, and it will help your stomach pain, too. It's not selective. So I was like, all right, and then I swallowed down a Vicodin with a tall vodka and orange. Which is when I discovered the silver lining of the measles epidemic at Western Washington University. Thank you.
Jane Entwistle, ladies and gentlemen.